Woo, the Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, the thriller that is Savzilla, is here for you at a time, at a date where I am used to, honestly, already after years of, I should be talking about a Star Wars movie right now, but I'm not because it didn't come out. So we'll just talk about everything else going on in Star Wars. And of course, I never do that alone. I do that with my dear friend and co-host, Robin Freebeard. Man, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me as usual.
Oh yeah. Yeah, boy, it is weird, isn't it?
Yeah. But you know what? Today is
what's today?
Today actually marks as we have less than 1 year to go until episode 9.
All right, so it's December 21st, so officially less than 1 year until episode 9 comes out. This movie is going to be a big deal. I mean,
one way or another, yeah.
Yeah. This is make or break. I've seen some people predicting that like Disney might reboot the universe or something. Like if this flops, I don't buy into that kind of rumor mill, and I usually
I don't see how they could possibly do that, because then you're just going to have that other half of the fan base that was, upset over, the old expanded universe going away, and it's just going to be a huge "I told you so." Yeah,
no, you're right. It really would. I mean, and for fuck's sake, they better not think about remakes. I mean, like that. You want to really lose money? Let me tell you, don't just make a shitty Star Wars movie. Try remaking it and then see how far that'll get you.
I mean, maybe they could do that someday, but it better be after I'm dead.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which, I mean, that's the funny thing is I still haven't heard anything really, like anything concrete that contradicts the idea that like they really have pretty much 100-year plan for Star Wars, like that this is going to go a really, really long haul. And I don't see why not, because they have such a, it's not like Marvel where you have a very specific time frame that you can explore. Like you can't really go back 6,000 years with the Marvel universe, even if you wanted to talk about the Celestials or something. I mean, I don't think people would buy it. There's no human to see the eyes through this whole situation. So with Star Wars, though, you have, tens of thousands of years of history to cover, all of which could be very interesting. So yeah, I think you could make TV shows and movies forever.
But the best laid plans of mice and men.
Yeah. Or Bob Iger. Yeah. I'm not sure if he's a mouse or a man, but maybe he's both working at Disney.
I was referencing Mickey Mouse, but yeah,
of course. Yeah. So anyway, well, speaking of a good thing, I guess, movie news, there's not a whole lot to say right now. I imagine the episode 9 news, because we are past the year mark, that we are going to start hearing a lot more from that. But of course, we have a lot of news to get into in this episode. A lot of stuff, a lot of announcements for The Mandalorian, which has a pretty near release date to episode 9, interestingly enough. But we're not going to open up with that. We're going to open up talking about really some of the coolest shit that's been done by Disney in Star Wars since they took it over. And that is, we're going to get in a little comic book talk, specifically though, around the end of what has really been the best comic series that Marvel has been doing for Star Wars, and that is what I'll technically call Darth Vader Volume 2. Volume 1, which you brought up actually last month on the Star Wars Update, Robin, that Volume 1 ended on issue 25 as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Right.
And I don't know why I was surprised that Volume 2 would end on 25, but when they had that last page in there, saying, hey, this is the end of this, this comic, I was like, whoa, hey, wait a minute,
Yeah, I mean, and which is a shame, because again, like this is, like I just said, and as we've been saying over the past few months, this is easily the best comic book that Marvel's got as far as Star Wars. I mean, it's top notch. So, for it to end on issue 25, I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's kind of nice to have that I don't know. It's interesting that they both volumes end at the same time. But it's a shame that it's ending, but wow, did it go out with a bang. I mean, this was issue 25, and really we could talk about the series overall, but issue 25 is definitely, I think, the culmination of the series. And spoiler alert, ahoy, folks, because you can't talk about this without spoiling it. Presentation wise, I'll say this was a very avant-garde, shall I say, comic book. In fact, the only comic book that I can really remember, because there's very little words in it. A lot of it is just pure action. A lot of it you're reading into what's on the page, and it shows the power of comic books, in my opinion, the unique power of that medium, where it is picture and words. And, I think of, for example, of like the 1984 Dune, or, the David Lynch Dune movie, where they tried to give you like that internal dialogue, which the book would present to you, and I think a lot of people feel, I love it, but I think a lot of people feel that it didn't work. With comic books, you can pull this off, where you can have like just words that have meaning to what's going on the page, but that don't have to actually be spoken, or, can be disjointed or something like that. And this is a very, very, very artsy issue and ballsy, in my opinion, issue of Star Wars, because there's so much, I think, being told here with, again, very, very little words. You really have to read into a lot of it. And it kind of reminds me. Go ahead.
I think they could have gotten away with having no words at all, too. I mean, I think the art is strong enough to have pulled that off. In fact, you're talking about, sort of classic conflicts. This reminds me a lot of the issue 21 of G.I. Joe. The silent
took it right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to bring up. Now, ironically, also from 1984. I'll let you continue.
But yeah, I mean, they would go on to do other silent issue, but this was a big thing back in 1984. This silent issue where Snake Eyes invades Destro's Cobra Fortress,
right,
in the mountains, and faces off with what would then was just known as the Red Ninjas. Yeah. And later on, we'd find out this is actually the ninja clan that both Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes were a part of. And he goes in to rescue. Goes in to rescue Scarlet. Right. And it was just such a fantastic episode. Like I said, it didn't have any words at all in it. It told the entire story, through the images, and it was probably some of the strongest art in the series up to that time.
Yeah, I mean, this was an award-winning comic book, this one issue of G.I. Joe. I mean, and Larry Hama, it turned him into a legend when this happened. And yeah, the only words in it were like to give you the sound effects of, like, say when, a plane would crash or something like that. But otherwise, there's nothing else there. And it's such a powerful issue. Like, you're stunned by it. Of course, people that don't know G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes actually can't talk. So, it worked, right? Like, it was believable why this would be a silent issue. And it was just so brilliant. This really, I'm not surprised that you would think of that too, but it totally reminded me of that as soon as I started reading it, or as soon as I started perusing this comic. I was like, oh, this is just like G.I. Joe, issue 21 there from way back in the 80s. So anyway, I mean, amazing style, but wow, a lot told in this. I mean, how did you feel about it overall, Robin?
It's hard to put in words, man. It's really kind of emotional, but at the same time, it was sort of like they didn't go as crazy as they could have. Mm-hmm. I think they certainly could have gotten, like really bizarre in turn, because we knew at some point that we were going to be seeing Padme, but there's some kind of question as to whether that was actually her. I don't think it really was her.
Okay. Well, this is a big point to bring up, but if you want to keep going, keep going.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah. So, all right. So now people are interpreting again this because there's so little words in this, and there's comments to make about what words are in it, because it's all phrases from everything. Like Kylo Ren even gets quoted, which is kind of weird, and it just sort of smacks of the world between worlds. From
I was
Rebels.
Just thinking that earlier too. Yeah.
Yeah, where like time is a mesh, which I agree with that concept, but in real life. So, but yeah, I mean, you get some of that, but now there's a point where you see Padme. Let's see. Oh no. Okay. Wait. All right. So there's the point where you see Padme. That is something worth discussing, but there's also a point where you see Shmi Skywalker, and that's another point worth discussing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like that's potentially huge. And so anyways,
because we're bringing in material from the old expanded universes about Anakin's, birth origins.
Yeah, right.
And so it lends a lot to that.
Yeah. So, but to get with Padme, this is where words do come in. And Vader is kind of like this formless creature, very artistically done, because you can tell which parts of him are like represent his actual fleshy body that he still had, and so on.
Right. And there's a point where he reverts back to a child and he has a whole body, and he starts, while he's walking across this plane, like his ethereal self is growing up and the limbs are coming off.
Yeah, right. Oh man, this is so crazy. You have to read it to really like grasp. We can only talk about so much on it, or describe so much on it. In fact, it really it drives home for me, which is something art does often, like just how much verbal language doesn't always solve everything. And this is one of my issues with logic, is that I think there are things beyond what can be written down, or what can be really said, and this comic actually brings that to light. But that's getting into more serious subjects. This, though, with anyway, when we get to where we see Padme in it, and she's on a balcony of a type, Anakin Vader is embodying his younger Episode 3-esque self as Anakin Skywalker, and he's saying, come with me, I can save you. And it looks like Padme is saying, no, you can't save me. This isn't how this is going to work, and I'm going to end myself. And that's kind of the interpretation I'm hearing from a lot of the community, is that she's pretty, like, it gives her that it was really her. She had the opportunity to go with Vader and to come back to life, and she chooses not to. And so it's kind of a way of, after the fact, giving her a more epic death than her just like not want, the droid in Episode 3 saying she just doesn't want to live. I like kind of the poetic nature of that. I really, really do. But then at the same time, I could understand where somebody's like, no, that's not Padme at all. But
so the reason I say that is because everything that we see up to that point has been kind of a conjuration from, Anakin or Vader's sort of like internal world. In fact, the Jedi that confront him out in front of that fortress inside this realm, one of them is not dead. Well, in fact, two of them, because we see Yoda there, right, and he faces off and he kills Yoda, but obviously Yoda's not dead.
And he never killed Yoda.
Yeah, and then when he goes into the fortress, Obi-Wan and Sidious are there and fighting one another, and obviously neither of them are dead.
Yeah, which, boy, that's something too. Like, as soon as they showed just a couple panels of that, I was like, fuck, I want that fight.
Right?
Like, I want to see, Obi-Wan versus Palpatine. Like, I want that now. And yeah. That's a fair point to bring up. That, but then, maybe it's a mixture of things.
Could be,
in that. I don't know, because Momin was clearly like real there, right. So there are actual people there that can seemingly come back from the dead. So in a realm like that, though, especially when we're talking about, or when the quotes being used as the only words throughout, more or less the only words throughout this comic, because they come from both the past, the future, the present, and so on, of this point in time with Vader, and this is taking place between Episode 3 and Episode 4. It does lend itself to like this mesh of time, and that, like, is this where all the dead are? Like, is Yoda actually, is this Yoda, but it's Yoda dead, so many years after that? This is going to lend itself to a ton of interpretation. I read an interview, I think David Soul or whoever was the writer, I read an interview with him earlier today, and it doesn't give any fucking answers. So
of course not. Yeah.
They're going to, George loved his ambiguity, and Disney seems to be doing no different. But yeah, I think I'm going to personally run with that was Padme kind of making her own call, but I'm not entirely sure. And like the thing with Momin is like, he's basically essentially on two sides of the veil. And so when he opens that doorway, he's there waiting. He knows where to find the door. That's true. Yeah. That is special, right? Because like he's in the helmet, but then the rest of him is also right. So would have Padme have known to have found Anakin or Vader there at that point? Yeah.
Or
No,
is this something coming from Vader's, like I said, internal sort of, his mind?
right. I mean, and Palpatine is there,
Right.
in multiple forms, in like emperor form, modern emperor form, as well as, it's weird. So another scene I want to talk about in that, I mean, I guess people will be debating this for some time, whether or not that was actually Padme or not. But there's a point where you see his mother, where you see Anakin's mother, and she is pregnant, and Sidious is behind her, and it looks like he's pulling the strings on what's going on in her tummy.
Right.
And so what some people are reading this as is that Darth Sidious might have kind of been the father of Anakin, effectively. That's a hell of a retcon to do. Not that George didn't do worse, but I mean, because when in episode 4, when you have Leia standing right in front of her daddy, inside of the first 5 minutes of the film, you think Anakin Skywalker would have known, but no. So, these things do get retconned, right? So I don't know, like that was interesting, and it kind of plays into, in fact, I mean, they even use the word. What adds to that is in that panel with these little words and quotes that you get, the word unnatural comes up. Now, I think the only time the word unnatural gets used in the entirety of Star Wars is during the opera scene in episode 3, great scene, where we hear about the tale of Darth Plagueis. And, Palpatine is saying to Anakin, some say the dark side has powers that are unnatural or whatever,
right.
and he's talking about how Plagueis could actually raise the dead or create life.
Right. Well, that was where first people got the idea that, Sidious or Plagueis had something to do with Anakin's birth.
Right.
So it's not exactly a new idea. It's just, like I said, a little bit of a twist on it.
Yeah. This seems to point more that it was Sidious then, but you're right. I mean, that is like an old EU thing that maybe Plagueis was somehow involved or something like that. I don't. Again, there's so much to read into this that's so amazing with this comic book. I mean, I loved it. I think it's easily one of the best issues they've ever done. It might stand as their best that Marvel has done with the new canon, or just shy. It's still not better than Lando, but it was damned good. What were some of the other points in this that came up for you, if any?
I really liked that they kind of, one thing I always liked about episode 1 was the promo poster they did, and how they kind of brought that into the comic, where Anakin's child self is casting a shadow of Darth Vader, and then Vader actually comes out of the shadow. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was a nice little illusion there. I agree. I thought that was a great promo poster back in '99. That was amazing. There's a lot to take in with this. It's a fitting ending. I didn't know how this was going to end, and it kind of feels like at the end of it that Vader closes off this doorway.
Because he destroyed the altar,
right,
that was there. So
on Mustafar, which he didn't build. That it had been there for apparently a very long time.
Right.
Yeah. So now his castle's done. So, we can bleed into Rogue One, as far as that goes, really, where we see that for the first time. And that more or less ends the story. And he pretty much closes the clamshell on talking to the Emperor, which that was kind of cool.
Right.
And it ends off with pretty much saying now Vader is like any remnant of Anakin Skywalker is, for all intents and purposes, gone.
I did think that was funny at the end there with Palpatine, because he kind of does a little shit talking, but then he's like, "So what did you find?"
Yeah,
and I'm like, you did something I couldn't do. What was it?
Yeah. And I think Vader knew, and that's why he. He did the classic. He did the Star Wars version of closing the cell phone on him. That was pretty cool. Vader always a badass. But now, I think pretty much what they were trying to get to with this entire volume of Darth Vader, with volume 2 here, which ended in issue 25 that we were just talking about, is pretty much saying this is how Vader became the absolutely ruthless and heartless and no more Anakin Skywalker Vader. Some people are going so far as to say that what Luke was sensing in Vader, as far as the good in him, might have actually been Padme somehow from this whole incident. A lot of interpretation going on with this because it's open to it. And this is one of those times where it's so well done. I like it. Normally I don't like things being left to interpretation. Like, don't give me the, the Mortis trilogy again. Okay. As great as that is, don't give it to me. And, but this is one where like you did it right. And there are genuine conclusions you can come to, even though yours might not be right or mine might not be right or whoever's, So, probably as far as a long run comic series that they've done, not a mini series, I think this is the best one that Marvel's done, to date. And just above, I would say, the previous Darth Vader run and also Poe Dameron. What did you think of the volume 2 of Darth Vader overall, Robin?
Yeah, I think it was consistently the best comic they've done thus far. Other than maybe like it's followed up closely by the Kanan series.
Oh yeah, that was great. Well, that was kind of a mini series though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, it went on for quite a while. They didn't have a set end date, and I think it was in the second year they decided, okay, we're going to end it on such and such issue. So, sure. But that would be my second favorite, series as far as being consistently really good.
Yeah. Did you have any other comments on Vader 25 or on the series overall?
No, other than like the fact, like I said, I was just kind of like the issue was such a shock, and then to get to that last page and going, it's over. No.
Yeah. Because they didn't announce it. They didn't tell anybody that it was going to be the end.
Yeah, there was nothing ahead of time saying that was going to be the final issue. They said it was going to be the final issue of that story arc.
Right.
They didn't say the comic was ending.
Yeah. Didn't tell us that at all. But where do you go from that? I think they knew that. I think they're like, Jesus fuck, we can't go anywhere. Anything we did after this would just look cheap. And so we kind of we're going to have to do a volume 3 or whatever. Right. Or they might do, in fact, this is, there's a couple other comics I want to talk about in a second, but we had been covering for the past couple months the saga of not Star Wars, but Chuck Wendig, who asked that, who got promptly fired from working in Star Wars, which I couldn't be happier about. But I mean, not that I want somebody losing money or something, but you know what I mean. And anyway, he was going to be doing I think it was the Shadow of Vader, I think was the name of the comic series originally that he was going to do. And really another out of nowhere with Vader. It was out of nowhere that volume 2 is going to end. Now it's out of nowhere. They're actually going to pick up, and they are going to do, I think, a bit of a mini series called Vader Dark Visions. Have I got that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is effectively, I guess, where they're allocating resources that they originally planned for Shadow of Vader. Not that it's going to be the same story, as I understand it, but
they got a whole new writer too.
Yeah,
and artist. I think that they said the artist was the guy who worked on the second Lando series.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fine.
And the Rogue One adaptation, he did that too.
Oh, those are both good. That's both great artwork. Very realistic. I like that.
Right.
Okay. No, that's cool. And in fact, I know they released kind of the cover, I think, for issue 1. And I thought it personally, I know some people were making fun of it. I thought it was badass. It's like, Vader
I think it's
horse.
Cool too. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like something Frazetta would do, where like Vader's on a horse and he's got a shield that's like in the shape of the Galactic Empire symbol. And then he's got his lightsaber, shining more or less. And I thought that looked awesome.
Yeah, Vader Dark Visions, which it's kind of funny because that cover with just that imagery and the name of the comic Visions. I don't know if you remember that I think it was Dark Horse put out a comic book series called like Visionaries or something. So it was sort of So it was sort of like alternate takes on different events in the Star Wars universe. They weren't canon.
Well,
on any level.
Yeah, so there was so Visionaries, so there was Star Wars Tales, which that was a lot of fun.
Right.
Which did do like alternate takes and some other things. And of course there was also what did they call that? Infinities? Was it Star Wars Infinities?
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah, that was a whole different interpretation of the events that could happen. And there's like a great moment, spoiler alerts, folks, but it's not canon anyway, like where Yoda pretty much crashes the Death Star into like the Emperor's throne room. It's pretty amazing. But the Star Wars Visionaries was also a very cool comic that I think actually that Dark Horse did put out. Which had a lot of really it was a lot of artwork. That is, and I didn't even think about that, so I'm glad you mentioned it, because it is very reminiscent of that cover, where you're taking like a lot of differing styles, but you're using Star Wars imagery on it. Because I don't think anyone would ever expect to see Darth Vader on horseback. I mean, it's very, very, Putin of them, but
yeah. In fact, what the comic book series was, it was done by some of the concept artists who worked on the prequels,
right.
And it was actually it was overseen by Jonathan Risler, who did the making of books.
Yep. Yeah. So what I liked in Visionaries, that's where, if you ever look these up, that's where like these they have these almost like Galactic Empire propaganda posters, where it's like a really, really hot gal wearing like cut off stormtrooper armor or a TIE fighter outfit or something like that. And it's really sexy. That's all from Star Wars Visionaries. And I love that artwork.
Yeah. Because they had some really wild stuff in those comics.
Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead.
For some reason, just the cover of Dark Visions just kind of like evoked that for me immediately, along with the name. It's like, oh, this is going to be something different. And I almost got the sense in the announcement, I don't know whether they said it or not, but it seemed like it wasn't going to be like one story, but it was going to be like a new story each issue, like an anthology.
If they want to do like Star Wars Tales, I'd be fine with that.
Right.
Even if it's not exactly canon, because they've pulled that stunt before, like with what was that Luke Skywalker book that came out last year in October? Legends of Luke Skywalker or something.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where you don't know if these stories are entirely accurate. Like if they want to pull that off with Darth Vader, hey, great. In fact, Star Wars Tales, there's issue number 9, which I tell people about all the time because I still think it's one of the coolest damn stories ever done. It's not canon, but you effectively get Darth Vader versus Darth Maul, and it's a pretty awesome, it's a pretty amazing like fight that goes down between the two of them. Pretty amazing battle, and Maul is like telling Vader the whole time, you can't beat me. You don't hate as much as I do. Like there's just no way you can win this. And you do, in the end of it, you find out it's all a test by Palpatine, whatever Maul was, a vision of some kind or something. But then finally Vader does beat Maul, and Maul is like, how did you do this? How did you beat me? And Vader, what could you possibly hate more than I do? And Vader just says to Maul, he says, myself. And I was like, oh man,
that was good.
Yeah, that was so choice. So if they want to do something like that, I say go for it.
And I think that's the case. I'm looking at the announcement again, and they actually have a different artist on issue 2 than on than issue 1. And okay. I don't know if the writer's going to be different or not too, but it definitely gets the sense that each issue is going to be a separate story.
Yeah, that works for me. I like that. I loved that kind of that little stuff. When one shots in comic books. In fact, that's a nice segue into what we're going to talk about next. But one shots in comic books where it's only one issue, one complete story inside of 20 some odd pages is such a rarity today. And fuck, do I miss that. I kind of get it why other Star Wars commentators don't always talk about the comics, because you have to wait like 6 months for a story to end.
Yeah.
And how much sometimes.
Well, and the one shots that they've done have been actually kind of really lackluster.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. The one about DJ.
Yeah. And the C-3PO one.
Yeah. Yeah. That was weird. That was just weird. Even like the Cassian Andor comic that they did, of course, not
right.
Show, but yeah. And then there were like Battle of Crate. There were some other ones that they've all been a little weak. But one shots can be great. Actually, I guess at the time it was just the Star Wars title until they called it Star Wars Republic. But when Dark Horse was running things, they did, I think it was like issue 26 or 27 of the main comic book. They did a one-off where just this Jedi lands on a planet that smacks very much of elves and kind of Legend of Zelda. And, he ends up getting it on with the princess. And it was just a character you never met before, but it was just lightsabers and having a good time in one comic book. And I think that's sorely lacking. So I'm all for that being a thing again. And Star Wars is actually kind of doing that now with, they have different ages, but right now the series they're running with is called Age of Republic, where each issue is concentrating on a different character. And so far we've had 2 of them, and they're going to do Age of Empire and they're going to do Age of Resistance or something, I guess. But right now there's a Qui-Gon Jinn comic out and there's a Darth Maul comic out. And the Qui-Gon Jinn comic. Now, this is kind of fitting because last month during our question of the month of who our favorite prequel characters were, Robin, you picked Qui-Gon Jinn, and I did. For him to have this like comic book come out, which I thought was actually really solid.
Yeah, it was great.
I thought that was kind of fitting. But tell me what you thought about the Qui-Gon Jinn comic.
Yeah, it was fantastic. In fact, it just kind of really built upon all the things I love about the character.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when I was reading. I was like, that's exactly what Robin said. He would do just that.
Just like they were taking ideas just right out of my head, and there's so much great stuff. I was like, Qui-Gon is like the only Jedi from that era that like really got what's going on. Right. And if he hadn't have died, it just how much different things would have turned out.
Well, and the comic book leads at that and kind of says that if he was the one that actually could have trained Anakin might have really fulfilled the prophecy, like in a way that not so many people may have needed to die. There was hints of it where he was understanding the necessity of balance with the light and the dark.
Right. In fact, there's a really great line in there where, he sits down on this, sort of dark side throne and he meditates. And these dark side plants come up and attack him. And after he's defeated them, he finds out that, they were his fellow Jedi masters that he just slewn. And when he wakes up, he realizes that, that the dark side and light side parts of this planet that he's on is sort of like, found some sort of equilibrium. And there's a great in line here where he says, that the light found its way in, balance, but a means beyond conflict. I really liked that a lot.
Yeah. No, this was an awesome issue, actually. Yeah. I'll tell you, what, thinking about it, what I really want, I would love to see a point where like the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn, which is also, speaking of that, I don't know if we brought this up last month when we were talking about Qui-Gon. He is the guy that pretty much figures out how to like communicate from the nether regions, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like he's the guy that figures out how to be a Force ghost, which is
he's incredibly, important to the original trilogy, because if he had not passed that knowledge down to Yoda and then Yoda to Obi-Wan, there really wouldn't have been anybody to have properly trained Luke.
Yeah. So, I would love to see like a Clone Wars story where he's talking to Barriss Offee and saying, look, you're right. The Jedi are the problem. And, and just kind of like goes down this whole list and like explains that, they're the ones that are the issue with the wars. Like that would be really cool. I don't want to take anything away from Barriss Offee because I thought she was such a great character, but I think that'd be kind of fun if there was something like that done. I wouldn't mind a little retcon like that. So, the Qui-Gon Jinn issue, I loved it. I love the discussion. Great powerful quote, frankly, from that. And then we also got the Darth Maul issue, not as strong, but I thought it was a great story. Maul is such a visceral character. Really he's almost like a Riddick in Star Wars, and kind of gets in touch with your animal side once you see him, and you can't help but like really enjoy what's going on, in a dark way. And I like that issue as well. So I've been very pleased with this whole Age of series so far, and I hope that they keep going with it. And like I said, it's a return to kind of one-shot comics, and good ones at that. What did you think of the Darth Maul comic and the series so far?
Yeah, I think the Darth Maul was pretty good. I did think it was, it didn't really show us anything new with the character, which is not surprising. It was cool, and that was a good action sort of story. And I always like stories that take place on Coruscant, so that was nice.
Yeah.
But so far this series is starting off really strong. Who's the next one?
I think it's Obi-Wan is our next issue.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
and then
which
we have
that'll be great.
And then we have Django and Mace Windu after that.
Yeah, I mean, really anything to build, like this is great. If it's going to build more mystique and more foundation for episode 1 and episode 2, that's needed, because I mean, I love those movies, but I can personally admit, where execution wasn't always there. And I mean, episode 3, I think most people agree is good, but yeah, anything to add on to episode 1 and 2, I'm all about it. So I'm enjoying this. Okay, so let's see. Do we want to talk a little Thrawn before we get into our next bit?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. So we got this is becoming an annual thing. We got another Thrawn book coming out. I think it was announced just after we did the last Star Wars update. And it's Thrawn Treason, once again being written by Timothy Zahn. And this is going to be a book that, as far as I understand it, concentrates on the relationship between, as to where the first Thrawn book just introduced us all to Thrawn again. Thrawn Alliances gave us an interaction between Thrawn and Vader quite a bit. And then this one seems to be the relationship between Thrawn and the Emperor. And I couldn't be more excited. I can't wait. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. And I have a feeling this might close out a trilogy because they're leading this time up right up till the end of Rebels.
Right. Where we lose Thrawn for however many decades.
Right. So, I mean, it's not necessarily the end of the character, but I definitely think that this is going to be the end of a trilogy.
Yeah, that works for me. I mean, Zahn's certainly not getting any younger. I loved his first Thrawn book. The second one, I still enjoyed it. Not as strong, in my opinion, as the first one. But I think you're going to put in two of... I mean, Thrawn's probably my favorite Star Wars character. Palpatine is very high on my list as well. But I've said this many times, as soon as you put Palpatine in a story, the seriousness and the intensity of what's going on just goes from 3 to 11 instantaneously. And so this is a recipe for greatness, in my opinion. Like I can't imagine how this book could possibly fall flat. So I'm very, very excited about it. Do you have any other thoughts on it overall?
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. How do you feel about this series compared to the original Thrawn trilogy?
Oh man, I know a lot of people are asking this kind of thing. I mean, this is certainly there's no way that this trilogy, no matter how good the next book is, no matter how good Treason is, there's no way that it can possibly match the power and the presence that the Heir to the Empire trilogy brought, because it gave us Star Wars back. Right. It's just like how no movie's ever going to top The Force Awakens. I mean, like that, not as far as like marketing and as far as money making. And I mean, like, and as far as hype and all that, like you can't, because we thought we were done with Star Wars movies. And then one comes back and you go, holy shit, we're all ready, and that's how it was, back in whatever, 92 or whenever Heir to the Empire first came out.
The reason I asked this, and this kind of comes back to something that we talked about in terms of the books when we first started doing the Star Wars update together. Yeah, and the one thing that I agree with you that the current Thrawn trilogy will never be able to match the original Thrawn trilogy, especially in just the size and scope of the stage that they're playing on. Yeah, and this is a problem that Star Wars novels still haven't fixed since we started talking about this, and that really just kind of the scope of things is still kind of too small. It's gotten a little better, but it's nowhere near what it was back in the expanded universe days.
Yeah. Though interestingly, you're right. And I completely agree. Though interestingly, Thrawn Alliances, one of the parts of the book that was a real gem was we finally got some answers of what are these terrifying things in the unknown regions, and so like this has been Thrawn in general has been a vanguard of what is to come that is a greater evil than the Emperor, which is something that Disney's clearly been working on trying to build up for a while. And So I mean, so we are kind of getting that, but it's very slow. Even if it was doing it, it's way too slow, and it's just not matching the pace and the expansion that we. And there's no fucking Mara Jade character, which that made that fucking. We'll talk more about that a little later, actually. But that made the Heir to the Empire, and her and Thrawn were just magic.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I hear you. I agree that there's just not enough expansion. It's too insular. Part of that is probably because they're trying to keep it that cohesive canon, or at least they're trying, even if they don't reference each other. I imagine there's a very conservative approach being, that's coming down from on high.
Right.
So they're
trying to keep the different authors from stepping on one another's toes.
Yeah. But the irony is that to have canon, or to keep canon, another easy way to do that is actually to allow people to really expand the universe, and like go really far out so that it doesn't affect the main characters at all. So I don't know why they didn't decide to go with that direction, but I know I hear you. But I mean, these are different books, certainly the new Thrawn trilogy. But especially the first one, like, I just love them. I mean, because now we're really getting Thrawn, and we're really getting like a look inside the mind of Thrawn, which was very different from what we got before.
And I think, if anything, that what I'm hoping for in this next book is that they do kind of start pulling back the veil on those things that they've been hinting at in the unknown regions, and really opening up to other people exploring, this, not only the region of space, but entire, segment of the Star Wars universe. Yeah.
And I mean, with episode 9 coming up pretty hot on its heels, because I think this book's supposed to come out either June or July 2019. I think they could take the risk of doing that, of like answering a little bit more, and it's not going to give anything away in episode 9, because I don't think episode 9 is going to. Like, I was expecting for them to bring up some big baddie out of the unknown regions more, but it's just going to be a closing out of the First Order, I think.
Yeah, we haven't even really learned anything about the unknown regions in the sequel trilogy.
Right, exactly. We only know that, like, the First Order was based there more from the books than anything. It's not even, I don't think you have any idea from the movies that that's the case, or anything else. But yeah, so it's a great question. I know some people are saying that Thrawn isn't as cool in the new canon as he was in the old. I totally disagree with that. I think he's perfectly cool in the new canon, and he's just going to get cooler. He's funnier, and he has you can really quote him now. As for before, there's just a lot of actions that you could appreciate from him, and you could, but now you can really quote him, and his Sherlock Holmes-ness totally stands out more now, and I just think it's awesome. So.
Right. Well, I think that's probably one of the issues that people take with this, is that the character is more emotional than he was in the original trilogy. So, I mean, it is kind of true to a certain degree that he was cooler in the original Thrawn trilogy, but in a different sense.
Yeah. Exactly.
A cool character, emotionalist character.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, he's cool as a cucumber. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So one thing I'm a little disappointed with this book, though, is that I thought they said like 2 weeks ago that you're supposed to be able to pre-order it. I picked up an Audible credit just as soon as they had it available. I was going to click pre-order, but it has not been available as far as I've seen for pre-order. And I checked earlier today too, and I still didn't see it. So anyway, when it comes out on pre-order, we'll talk about it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Andy Gutierrez said that it would be available next week, and it didn't happen. So, oh well. Okay, well, shall we move on to some other news?
Let's do it.
All right, so this is going to be a lot of talk about The Mandalorian. Of course, I expect we'll be doing a lot of talking about The Mandalorian as it gets closer to release on the Disney streaming service, Disney Plus. The first bit of news, ironically, is something I can't believe I didn't even bother to try and think about. Like, I didn't even ask myself the question. So who's going to score this? Who's going to do the music for it? And why I didn't think about that, I don't know. But then finally we got the answer, and I'll admit I'm excited. So they announced that Ludwig Göransson is going to be composing the score for the however many episodes we've got, 10 or 12. I keep forgetting the exact number of The Mandalorian. And this guy has done, well, I'll tell you this. So I did a review on Sovereign Tech Prime of the latest Rocky movie, that being Creed 2. Now, while I wasn't a biggest fan of the movie, I didn't really talk so much about the actual, some of the music I talked about, but the actual score that Ludwig Göransson did, I thought was dynamite. And I listen to it a lot when I'm working out. I mean, it's really, really solid stuff. A lot of rocky cues that he's playing with, but that's a good thing, because if you can do great with classic Bill Conti themes, you could probably do great with some classic John Williams stuff when you mix that in with, even his own original work. And so I know this guy can build intense action, intense emotion with his music. He also did the music for, or the score for Black Panther. I didn't give a shit about the Black Panther album, but the score itself that Ludwig did, I thought was awesome. So I have no reason to feel anything but confidence that we're going to get great music out of this. I think this guy is supremely talented, young too, but supremely talented. Anyway, you have thoughts on it, Robin?
Not really. I mean, honestly, I'm not that familiar with his work. I haven't seen Creed 2. And of course, I've seen Black Panther, but I'll be honest with you, I don't recall. I mean, the soundtrack was good, but I don't remember any discernible themes from the movie.
No, so this is a funny thing. I think either of those movies, when you watch them, his music doesn't stand out when you watch the movie, but if you listen to this, like the soundtrack standalone, it's great. Like you don't even notice it. But
okay,
well, I'll have to check those out. Yeah, it's a shame that his music doesn't really get the chance to shine. And so Black Panther and Creed 2 had the same thing, where there was like a lot of, various rap songs or something that were more prominent in the movie than the actual scoring, because his work was great. So anyway, so I don't blame you for not noticing, because I think that a lot of what's going on the screen was kind of killing what he was putting out there. But it's awesome. And
a Star Wars movie? Oh my good. Well, how could that ever happen?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Perish the thought.
So, well, in any case, I think we'll have some great new Star Wars CDs to listen to when this guy's done. So, so that was cool. That was a nice announcement, to bring out there. We'll see what happens exactly with that. Now we do also have an announcement of, and really these are more just like making it official. There had already been, the rumor mill had been going wild saying that these people were involved with The Mandalorian. But we do have quite an actors list, and it is a star-studded list, in my opinion, of people that are going to be a part of The Mandalorian. We don't really know all of their characters. We know that Pedro Pascal, who I guess he's a big deal in Game of Thrones. Have I got that right?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I haven't seen like the last couple of seasons, but name sounds familiar.
Yeah, I haven't seen like the last 5 seasons of Game of Thrones. And I have no
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I never will. So I'm gonna find out all about Pedro watching Star Wars.
I mean, he was the big announcement in this list of actors. But honestly, I think there are bigger names there than him. Yeah.
Well, start breaking them down. Go for it.
Well, I mean, Nick Nolte. I mean, huge. I mean, really, that's who the headline should have been about. And what a great casting decision. I mean, I could definitely see him just being, this grizzled old soldier.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah, it works. Yeah.
I could see him even taking off, some Barsic armor, taking off the Mandalorian armor.
Right,
and just being like, hey there, buddy.
Right, yeah. He's like the old, Mandalorian master. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right. I mean, Nick Nolte is that rare guy who's like totally badass, really gruff, but then at the same time, like he can be hilarious, like genuinely so damn funny, and just like,
or even sentimental. I mean, he has great range.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy doesn't get enough credit. Fuck. Yeah. So that was an awesome choice. I'll bring up one quick that excites me, maybe even the most. Speaking of Creed,
yes,
that being Carl Weathers himself, Apollo Creed, the man. I love Carl Weathers. I mean, like I like Creed more. I like the character of Apollo Creed more than I like the character of Rocky Balboa. I love Carl Weathers. I think was fantastic in Predator. He was fantastic.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, when him and it's like you're losing your touch, Dutch. I'm like, oh god! And then when they kind of clasp hands and they got their arms are fuck. He was dying. He was amazing. But even like some of his lesser films, Action Jackson. I've watched that movie a million times since I was a kid. I shouldn't have, but I mean I did. yeah, he's Carl Weathers, and he did there was a USA show called The Colony or something, I think. It was kind of like a V style show where there's like this alien invasion in LA.
Okay.
And so he's done work recently, and he is familiar with science fiction. I mean, obviously Predator, and then of course The Colony, and so on. So I think this is going to be a fine fit, and he's just another of those guys, just a badass, and he can just be serious, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with him. But who else do we have on the dock with the?
Let's see, we had Giancarlo Esposito, who is probably most famous from what's that series with the drug dealer? Oh shit, I can't remember the name now.
Begins with a P, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
That's all right.
Yeah. I am the one who knocks guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I mean, that's big. That's cool.
Yeah. Let's see. A name that I didn't recognize at first, but when I went and looked at her IMDb profile, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Emily Swallow, who played Lisa in the Castlevania series.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take that. All right. That's a good call. Yeah. So, I mean, just that. And then, of course, last month we talked about Gina Carano coming on. I'm very much digging this cast, what I've heard so far. And I know some others have brought it up, but I want to bring it up too. It's nice to have older characters,
Yeah.
It's nice to have. I mean, that was kind of one of the nice things with like The Force Awakens. Like, yeah, no, that's okay. People can still kick ass when they're in their 60s. I know. I saw Star Trek 6 when I was like, 10, and and all of them kicked ass in that. So Kirk and everybody. So I appreciate that, and I actually think that's really cool. To bring that in. It does raise the question for me, and it's a question I want to pose to you. I mean, considering that. I mean, I know Carl, like that show on USA was kind of a big deal for a little while. So Carl Weathers isn't that out of a pick, but I mean, they're willing to grab anybody. If you're going to get Nick Nolte, you're going to take Carl Weathers. It seems like anyone's up for grabs. I don't know if we're going to get Dolph Lundgren or anything like that, but, but who, what's an actor you'd love to, just like a dream actor? I mean, you could pick from the 80s, whenever, that you'd just love to see them pull right into Star Wars.
Honestly, I kind of like to see Viggo Mortensen from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yeah,
right. Strider.
Yeah. Strider. Yeah.
That's okay. Oh, he would do well.
Yeah.
In fact, put him in Imperial uniform too. He'd do pretty good. Okay, that's a good call. I'm going to admit that I heard someone say this previously, but it was also my first pick. And I have a kind of a track record of being pretty good at deciding who gets to be in these things, or calling ahead of time who gets to be in these things. Like, I knew Scott Bakula was going to be a starship captain, like, I don't know, 6-7 years before that was even a thing. So anyway, but I'd love to see Van Damme, and I'm dead serious. I think Jean-Claude Van Damme could be, I mean, I know people think he's kind of ridiculous, but I think he could be a total badass in Star Wars. And I wouldn't even mind seeing him pick up a lightsaber. That might be kind of cliche, but I'd go for it. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'd be down for that. Is he even still acting?
Yeah. He had a movie. Oh shit. What was it called? Not Out of Control, and he's been pitching that show he's been wanting to do on Amazon Prime for a while now. But yeah, he still has movies come out and everything. I mean, he did do Expendables. Well, that was Expendables 2. I guess that was a little while ago. But speaking of Expendables, that would be my other pick, because I would love to see Sylvester Stallone. And in fact, I'd almost think he's already in Disney with, Guardians of the Galaxy. I'd almost think it'd be a crime to not have Carl Weathers and Stallone in Star Wars together and do something. I don't know. Go ahead.
Who else I would have picked if Star Trek hadn't already just grabbed him up would be Anson Mount.
Yeah,
he's fantastic.
What a look. Yeah. No, I agree with you. The more I see that guy, and I'm just like, fuck, what a...
Yeah, I don't know if
but go ahead.
I don't know if you've watched Hell on Wheels, but I mean, that is a really great series, and Cole Meany is in that series too.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to watch it now.
Yeah, it's it's really damn good. I mean, it's
how's the Chief looking these days?
He's looking really good. In fact, he's one of, I mean, like, he must have picked up something from Patrick Stewart, because both of them seem like they haven't really just aged that much. Not nearly as much as the rest of the cast.
Yeah, right. Okay. No, I mean, Cole Meany. Well, I mean, I'm digging Anson Mount, and I just want to see more. But like Cole Meany, that sells me. If I could see Chief O'Brien kick some ass, all right.
Yeah. Oh, and he definitely kicks some ass in that series. He plays a really shrewd character.
What's the show about? What is it?
It's a Western. It's about the building of the Transatlantic Railroad.
Oh my God! And it's about railroads. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
So it's they're in a race with the Union Pacific to beat them to the West Coast.
My Atlas Shrugged is on. I am for this. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's really, I mean, it's very much a Western in the vein of like Deadwood.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah. I actually, I don't talk about this much. I love Westerns, like Lonesome Dove and Deadwood and all that. I mean, I think that shit's awesome. Okay. All right. I'm definitely going to watch this. I mean, we're probably not ever going to hear him say the bloody Cardis can't be trusted, but that's all right. We'll deal with it. Wow. What a great call. All right. Well, as far as other people, just quick, they did announce that IG-88 and Bosk were going to be in The Mandalorian. I don't know if we have the actors for that, but the characters are going to be there. How do you feel about that, Robin?
That's cool. I mean, it makes sense.
Sure.
We're dealing with, sort of, I mean, Mandalorians at this point are kind of like, if Boba Fett's anything to go by, relegated to, serving as bounty hunters. They're not working for the Empire or the Rebellion, so they got to find work somewhere. And it stands to reason they might, run across a few famous bounty hunters.
Yeah, I'm going to put something on you here. So I like it. I think it's great and it fits. First off, I think they wanted to do a Boba Fett show. Like, I think Filoni and whoever else, Filoni obviously has had his eye on the character for a while. He's been developing it since he was a kid, or, since Boba Fett was a kid. I think that everybody involved really, really wanted to do a Boba Fett show. And the argument right now is that, well, they weren't allowed to, like, you couldn't,
Right.
I mean, and the timing's right. They want to do it post Return of the Jedi. Come on. We want to do some, we want some Boba Fett. I would just a half-hearted prediction that at the end of this first season, we find out that Pedro is Boba Fett. That the character, the Mandalorian, might actually end up being like Boba Fett. Probably not, but I'm going to give that like a 55-45 chance that might happen. And it might happen in the idea that like Boba Fett is kind of a mantle that gets passed down, because I know Pedro's kind of a younger guy.
Okay. Yeah. Kind of like a Dread Pirate Roberts sort of thing. Precisely.
Yeah. So that would be interesting. Or if there isn't some kind of quest maybe for Boba Fett's armor or something like that. Like, I don't know. I think that's going to play a big part in this. I mean, if you're going to bring in IG-88 and Bosk, you're going to bring in characters, especially Bosk, you're going to bring in characters that knew Boba Fett personally. So yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
And there is kind of precedence for that. And not that I want to bring up, Duck Windegg, but he did kind of hint in one of the in the Aftermath novels that somebody else had taken up the Mandalorian arbor that Boba Fett had.
Right.
That they had found it on Tatooine and somebody else was using it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm game for this. Like, that's okay with me. But yeah, anyway, we'll see what happens. But yeah, cool. So, I mean, great actors coming in, great characters, in my opinion, coming in. I think this will flesh out just so much more with Star Wars. So, I'm excited for it. Shall we move on to the present running Star Wars television show?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. So actually we're into mid-season break now after episodes 10 and 11. We've reviewed the previous I guess 9 episodes of Star Wars Resistance, which is the running cartoon on the Disney Channel. And so we have episode 10 and episode 11 of Resistance to talk about. I think episode 10 was Secrets and Holograms. Episode 11 was Station Theta Black. I think episode 11 really is one of those episodes that takes the cake for the entire series in a very good way.
Thus far,
Yeah. So 10, I don't even know how much really to talk about with 10, but 11 is really, we got the First Order pretty much. And of course, Poe Dameron comes back, Oscar Isaac doing great voice work as usual. And an interesting episode. And we get Captain Phasma, which Gwendolyn Christie, of course, is also there. We get some hints as to like the First Order's encroachments in the universe and what that looks like, what that feels like. And of course, we also get the character of General Leia, which there's some controversy around the voice actress. They changed the voice actress at the last minute. I don't know that we necessarily need to talk about that, but bottom line, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we don't need to talk about that. It's silly.
Yeah, exactly. So just be careful what you tweet about, folks. So if Duck Wendig and some voice actresses have anything if you have anything to learn from them, just be careful what you tweet about. So, but anyway, I enjoyed both of these episodes. Episode 11, again with the First Order, really, of course, stands out. And Captain Phasma you're getting, I think, a Captain Phasma that matters and that like stands up to what you see in the films.
Right.
So this is a winning recipe, if anything, just to give us more Phasma so that we have more depth to the events of episode 8 and 9 of the new Star Wars trilogy. But what did you think about the episodes, Rob?
Well, the other thing I would mention is that with Poe Dameron, we kind of get more leaning into about how sort of reckless and irresponsible he is prior to episode 8.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm still amazed at just how funny they make that character. He's still hilarious. Which, I'm never going to forget, like from The Force Awakens, where he's just like, "Oh, we're going to do this," when he's breaking out with Finn, and I'm just like, "Oh, right." Or even when he says to Kylo, it's like, "All right, so wait, do you talk or I talk? How does this work?" Yeah, so they've really, amazingly in a kid show, I think they've captured much of the flavor of what we see of the Resistance in recent movies. And that's when these episodes where Poe Dameron's involved, where the Resistance is like more of a central piece of it. How do you feel that they treated, General Organa here? Do you think Leia had good representation within it?
It seemed kind of subdued.
Sure.
So we're definitely getting a hint that we're going to see more of her in the near future. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, not the first time we've seen her in animation either. She was in Rebels, which she was great in that. They really knocked out there, hit the character with that one. But yeah, very subdued. You're right.
Speaking of which, is the carrier she's on the same one that her dad was using in Rebels?
Oh,
because it's got the same paint job.
That's a good question.
I need to look that up on Wikipedia.
Yeah. That's a good catch if it is. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, she, having her there, adding more of her character in, of course, that's wonderful. And that just adds instant, even though it's subdued, it still adds instant gravitas to the show, and makes it something I think worthwhile. I think the real story so far that we've gotten with the first half of Star Wars Resistance overall is that this is really a show I think worth everybody to watch. I know a lot of people thought this is one that they would skip. I don't think you need to skip this. I think there's some good stuff happening here. Even though some of the slapstick's a little much, but it's okay. It works.
It's really good. I think me personally, I still put the platform classic just slightly above Station Theta Black, but just barely.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Just because of the emotional and like really the dark depth it went. Shit. Right. His brother killing the guy, his brother's entire family. Like, fuck. Yeah, I mean, really, that I agree with you. I think that's still the best episode so far within season one. I mean, admittedly, did not come into this with high expectations, but it's exceeding what I had so far. Other than we're still not getting, and I'm hoping that the second half of the season resolves this. We're still not getting the aces. We're not getting enough of those characters.
Yeah, that has been the biggest disappointment of the series to date.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we want, Griff Halloran, we want we want to see these characters in action doing their thing. But hopefully, I think it picks back up in maybe February or March, and we'll see from then. But I'm not even sure how many episodes total we're supposed to get after that.
Yeah, and if Star Wars animation, the way they've handled their pacing, things usually tend to really pick up after the break.
Yeah, good. And you know what? Great point, because that's when all those like really intense trailers would come out.
Right.
Yeah, saying like, holy shit, now everything's going to get real. And yeah, that's a solid point to bring up. So, I mean, anything else you want to comment on with Star Wars Resistance?
No, I think we covered it.
Yeah. So, but do check it out, folks. If you thought it was for kids, I think it's got a little something special going for it. All right, what do we got next on the list? Well, here's something that really is for kids. Okay. You don't have to watch this, folks. You've got my permission. I imagine Robin would say the same.
Yeah.
So, Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures. Now, we announced this last month on the Star Wars update that it was going to be coming out. In fact, like the day after we released our episode, I think it came out. The first one did.
Right.
And these are a series of shorts, and literally like a minute and a half a pop, where it is just covering some of the bigger moments or little storylines that happen throughout the entire Star Wars saga. And mainly in the movies, which has actually been a little bit of a disappointment for me. I was really hoping, I know they would have had to bring in voice actors, and they've just been using like the words generally that have already been done by great actors in the past. I would have loved if they bring in some comic book or novel moments, to like hint people in on those, but I get what they're doing. Maybe in the future they will, but I get what they're doing with this. And more or less, they're doing this beautiful art style, and they are putting in music and sound effects, of course, and a little bit of motion, and they're using the quotes from, whoever matters. If it's Luke Skywalker, they have Mark Hamill talking, you go down the list. And I mean, for what it is, it's pretty, but I recognize who the audience is with this one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I really don't have anything to add other than what I said last month, because they pretty much confirmed everything that I already thought about it in terms of both the art style and what they were trying to accomplish with it, and what it is. It's everything I said it was. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is Star Wars for the ADD, and no. I mean, yeah, I can't. I don't know. I like it. It's fine. I get who it's for. It's not for me. I know that, and that's all right. Like, but at the same time, I think I think I said this last month anyway, but I'll just say it very quickly that kids can watch The Empire Strikes Back, the youngest of kids, and they can fucking get it, and they can be enthralled. There's to get kids on board with Star Wars, you don't have to do minute and a half clips like this. But I mean, the thing is that you have investors and you have other people, and I think part of it, and I guess I want to somewhat empathize with Lucasfilm. I don't really, but I will a little bit, in that you have to put so many hours and time and money into certain demographics to please investors. And in today's, very social, what appears to be socially conscious world, that includes, making sure you're paying attention to this group, and kids are, of course, its own demographic. So I could imagine that this is something like they had to do,
Yeah, that's such part of a much, much, much bigger conversation that's going on in all realms of entertainment these days. Yeah.
And it's one, honestly, I would love to have with you, but
this is not the time or the place.
No, but I would love to have it with you. But we maybe in the future we'll talk about that, because it is something happening and it is affecting entertainment in a very real way. So, all right, let's move on to our next story, and this is a story actually, Robin, that you found, that I read it and I was like, well, I don't disagree with anything here. Not really. And the title of the story is, and this is from Tor.com, which is actually had, of course, that's by the publisher that publishes a lot of science fiction books. They have quite a good blog series. They've done a few different ones that where they're not afraid to talk about anarchism either. I've really read some great pieces on there. So, I don't see this as, I mean, Tor isn't doing Star Wars books, so I really feel like they're doing this out of the, it's not out of marketing. This is just a subject they really care about. It's by Emily Asher Perrin, and it's Star Wars is really a cautionary tale about devoting all technological advancements to death. And I think it's a salient point. Basically what she's saying throughout this whole thing, and link is in the show notes, folks, and I really recommend you read it. We don't have to read the whole thing because she's just making her case. And the case is, as I understand it, is that like everything in the Star Wars universe, like the Star Wars universe may look cool and fun, and it's a great sandbox to play in, artistically, but it's actually a horrible place. And in fact, all technology is it's literally all about war. And like even the cool technologies all get just relegated to like sideshows. Like, how cool is C-3PO that he can talk 6 million languages, and how R2-D2 can like hack any computer and all that. But like C-3PO is considered a joke. R2-D2 is really just designed to fly to help pilot a starfighter, a war machine, and so on. And, she makes a point. I mean, what do you think, Robin?
Well, I think this is spot on. In fact, I think George Lucas wrote this with intention, because he always said that the original Star Wars was an anti-war movie. And this really highlights that in a big way. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of a dark reflection of our own world, because so much of the technology that we have today that, we all take for granted or depend on has all come out of, military research.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll say that absolutely. I mean, you go down the list, from the internet to the microwave. I mean,
right.
It's yeah. And I mean, again, she makes a really solid case and brings up example after example of how all this works. It is called Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what we expect. There's another video done. I forget the gal's name, but I shared it in a Sovereign Tech newsletter not long ago, where she was talking about how, is Disney supporting fascism or like promoting fascism by how it promotes the empire or the First Order and so on. And the conclusion she more or less came to is just that it uses the imagery, but it actually doesn't tell you anything about fascism. It's very hollow in what it's actually saying. And I kind of feel like that can sort of point at this, is that now, while I agree with you that Lucas initially, he did, and even with the prequel trilogy was totally, he said it himself, like it was totally referencing the war machine and how it's all gets built up from behind and so on.
Right. I mean, this is the military industrial complex.
Right, exactly. And he was totally trying to tell a story about that. I mean, he didn't make enough deep cuts, I think, as he should have, but yeah, I can see where he was going with that. But now, I mean, with Disney in charge, certainly, like this is now, I think that just the war is just what's cool, and it makes for action, and they don't realize that that's what they're doing,
right. Yeah.
At least I don't think so.
I hope somebody at Disney, is paying attention and reads this article, because this is important.
Yeah. And, something that I think that they retconned, that Disney specifically retconned, I think, that sucks, is like Alderaan back in the old EU and back with George Lucas, like there was no weapons, there was no army. It was a completely pacifist planet. Very similar to what you would get with the Mandalorians in the Clone Wars. And that has been changed to where like that I guess was not the case anymore. And that's a shame, because I think you need that culture that stands as, okay, this is what it's supposed to be like. I mean, I think even George Lucas, when he destroyed Alderaan in the first movie, had an idea of what he was doing with that. It was very iconic and representative of this is, peace is gone. Like, in the last bastion of what life should be like just got wiped out. And it's a shame that we don't have that. And yeah, I wish that Disney would read this and say, okay, we need to start adding in pacifist elements into Star Wars again, because there just aren't any, that I can really think of that Disney has done anyway. You made a comment to me comparing this to Star Trek earlier. I mean, tell me about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really is kind of like Star Wars is the yin to Star Trek's yang, because it's like in Star Trek, the technology obviously is not centered on producing war machines,
right?
And it's a very bright and hopeful sort of future with just enough of a dark element to serve as a warning. Whereas Star Wars is really super dark, with just enough of light to see, some bit of hope.
Yeah. I think that's a great point to bring up. And you can really, if you're just, like Emily in this story is talking about the technology, singularly. And I think if you compare it to Star Trek's technology, not counting like, say, the Defiant, which is a much later creation, but I mean, you pretty much had for hundreds of years, all you had were phasers and photon torpedoes, and there wasn't much evolution in that, as to where, you can just go 30 years and you go from something that can destroy a planet to suddenly, oh no, now we're building a space station that can destroy an entire star system. Right.
Right.
And that's not just Disney either, because Kevin J. Anderson started that whole fucking trend too, when he created the Sun Crusher in the Jedi Academy trilogy, which, you get to the point with the problem in the old EU, there really was a problem where, I mean, the next thing they had to come out with was a weapon that would just wipe out the universe entirely. That's the next place that they could go. They just kept creating doomsday weapon after doomsday weapon after doomsday weapon. And that does get tiresome. But, with Star Trek, it's interesting that, I mean, probably the most incredible thing, piece of technology in Star Trek, not the transporter, but actually the deflector dish, which seems to be able to do fucking anything. But whenever they wanted to really they only ever use it once to actually like try and take out a Borg ship. Of course, that doesn't work. But more or less, they use it to just try and like repair stuff in the universe. I mean, their most powerful technologies that they have is always about trying to just fix something. And it's usually some kind of scientific problem. And like it's, fixing a singularity or something like that. And so, yeah, to say it's the yin to the yang, I totally agree with you. They are very much polar opposites, which is interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that. Go ahead. But yeah, no, it just occurred to me when I was reading this article. This is really kind of like they are just sort of the dark reflections of one another, the dark and light reflections of one another, but they're it's not to saying that Star Wars is totally without hope, or that Star Trek has no dark elements to it, because it obviously does. But of like the contrast between the two is night and day, literally.
Yeah. Actually, something just came to mind for me quick, and that's shield technology. This has always been, because people have had these arguments a billion times over, like, okay, what wins, the Enterprise or a Star Destroyer? I mean, this has been the thing going on since I was a kid, and the easy answer was always the Enterprise, because a Star Destroyer just fires like lasers, and the Enterprise has shields that can easily deflect lasers. So like, that's not even a problem. Now, I know in Star Wars, they do have shields of a kind, but it's nowhere near the like highly developed technology or the exciting technology that they make it in Star Trek, which they do. I mean, there's metaphasic shielding. There's all these different kinds of shields that they start developing and everything.
I honestly always thought that argument was kind of silly. Just to defend Star Wars a little bit here, because
all right, let's do it.
The lasers on used in Star Wars aren't actual like lasers that we have today. They're they're turbo lasers. They're basically the way I've seen the technology described, it's more akin to disruptors in Star Trek.
Okay. Well, ion, like the ion cannons certainly are. Like they're like, that's an actual technology. But yeah, so far as like the actual, and the ion kind of, I've always seen that sort of more like a defensive technology than an offensive one. Yeah, it's meant to disable.
Yeah, but the actual the quote unquote lasers and turbo lasers in Star Wars are the people who said that those can always be repelled by the Enterprise's shield. I always thought that was silly because they're not really just simple lasers.
They put something in the Tabana gas, and Lando sells the best. Just go to Cloud City. And no, yeah, that's fair. Actually, I mean, the fact that they call them turbo lasers maybe is even hinting that they're a little something extra, a little something special. Right. But sure. Yeah. So, but anyway, point being is that Star Trek clearly concentrates far more on, on defensive technology than it does anything like that they're going to shoot.
Not even just defensive technology, but just technology that services the furtherment of mankind and exploration and scientific knowledge and all these other things that just it's not just centered around military, because even defense technology is military technology to a certain degree. Whereas, it's not all the technology in Star Trek is focused around the military.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point to bring up. Yeah. I mean, and it does, I don't know if it says anything about us, like as a species or as a culture or anything, the fact that we enjoy Star Wars so much and like, we don't always pay attention to this, what this article brings up about, like, wow, everything's just meant to destroy. And it is an ugly place to live. Like, I mean, that becomes more apparent, especially with Disney. I mean, like I'm still in shock at what Corellia looks like in Solo Star Wars story. I'm like, all right, it couldn't be that dumpy. Like, come on. And every planet seems to be just a shithole like that, right, that Disney has been making. And that's
except for the primitive ones with no technology on them.
Well, that's a whole other conspiracy theory. But yeah, and I don't know. I'd love to see. I could use some utopia in my blockbusters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think for either you or I, or even a lot of Sovereign Tech listeners, that this article is particularly revelatory. I think it's something that we're all aware of, and to be honest with you. This is what I appreciate about people that can enjoy both Star Trek and Star Wars at the same time, because they are at some level aware of this dichotomy and can enjoy both and appreciate both for what they are.
Yeah. Yeah, they're the Qui-Gon Jinns of sci-fi,
right?
They hold balance down. And I agree. I agree with you. I think that's a great point to bring up. Yeah, but I mean, this really did solidify it, like just how like crazy the technology is in Star Wars and what it's really all about,
right?
And the mindset there, and I guess to keep Star Wars, it's in the name, going. I mean, I don't imagine it's ever going to change, not really. But it'd be nice if there was a couple bastions of peace somewhere. Right. So need some new Alderaans,
or just at least return. I mean, the greatest thing about this article is really just in the title, and it's pointing out that it's a cautionary tale.
Sure.
And I think we need more of that in Star Wars, where it's sort of like, hey, wake up! This is what's going on in our society. You don't want to end up like the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, in irony of ironies, like Wing Commander 4, starring Mark Hamill, of course, as Colonel Blair, I don't mean to demote him, Colonel Blair instead of Luke Skywalker, is really about this, where Admiral Tolwyn is like, oh no, we need to keep making new weapons and we need to keep going to war. We'll make up enemies if we have to, and we'll just keep going. And Blair comes in and, sets the universe straight, saying, no, this isn't how it's going to keep going. Like we can't do this. We're going to lose who we are. And that's a shame. I'd love to have a moment like that, like at the end of Wing Commander 4 in Star Wars, even, and hell, it could be Mark Hamill again, delivering the great speech saying that this is, we can't do it this way. We can't just keep thinking about weapons. So yeah. Interesting.
Oddly enough, I think that's where George was headed. I mean, we talked about this before, but and it's funny because I saw another article recently talking about George's ideas for the sequel trilogy, and the comment I keep seeing come again and again is like, well, everybody can sigh a sigh of relief that he's not in control anymore, and I'm like, no, this is really kind of a damn shame. I really would have liked to have seen what he had in mind.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, someday, I'd love a comic book series.
Yeah. I mean, they did an adaptation. Dark Horse did an adaptation of his original script. So yeah, why not do, a comic book based on George's original idea for the sequel trilogy? I would love that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's exactly what came to mind for me was that the Star Wars, not just Star Wars, but the Star Wars. And Dark Horse did a great job with that. I'd love to see them do it again. Yeah, maybe one day we'll get to see that. I don't know. And I'd be curious to see what people think. If I mean, and that's a shame because people just were hating George Lucas so hard. And
well, and he's aware. I think he's even mentioned in interviews is that the fans would have hated this. And honestly, if I just happened to run into George Lucas, the one thing I would say to him is I love the prequels, and I really wish I could have gotten to see what you had in mind for the future of Star Wars.
Yeah, just quick on that. I on Twitter, some things I hate social media, but some things are just precious that we have on there. J. Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5 and Sense8 and so on, he's been tweeting a lot recently and responding to questions about Babylon 5 and everything. And everybody's asking him, hey, can you bring it back? And he keeps saying, it's like, no, I can't. He says, none of us were as smart as George Lucas, where he kept control of his property. From 20th Century Fox, like he could make something that the fans didn't have to give a shit about.
Yeah.
And he has the money to do it, Well,
honestly, that could only happen once.
Sure.
I mean, he's not getting himself that credit because basically George is what taught the entire movie industry that they need to hold on to those rights.
Yeah.
And they were never going to let them go again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's really deprived the world of a lot of, continuation of great stories.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. But I mean, I don't think people realize that. Like, there's a lot of forces at play as to why either the creator doesn't get what they want to do, or the fans don't get what they want to get. One or the other. And I think
that's part of that conversation that we were talking about earlier.
Yes, it is. I am going to line that baby up. But so anyway, anything else you want to comment on with this article?
No.
Yeah, no. So I definitely recommend everybody read it though, and feel free to comment below. If there's a real groundswell of comments underneath an episode of the Star Wars Update, I'm happy to talk about the more questions.
I would love to get some feedback.
Yeah. I mean, a couple people comment, but if a bunch of people really want to put in their thoughts and like something really, drawn out, like I'd be happy to read it and we can respond to it.
Right. So, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, then let's move on to our fan production of the month. And this one's just one for me. I did the pick this month and it's kind of fun. I'm a fan. Well, I'm a metalhead. I have no problem admitting that. I'm actually a big fan. I wasn't always, but but I definitely have been in recent years. I'm a big fan of Disturbed. I love that band. I think they do some pretty amazing shit. And somebody took like a bunch of Disturbed songs and just mixed it in with so the actual title, there's a YouTube link in the show notes. The actual title of it is Star Wars Sith and Dark Jedi Disturbed Mega Mix. And it's as crazy as it sounds because you're just seeing a bunch of badass moments with a bunch of badass characters, your darker characters and so on, getting mixed in with some Disturbed songs. And it works so well. And what it just brings home for me is how bad I really want to get experimental musically in Star Wars. I don't think Ludwig Göransson's going to be the one to do it, but man, I would love to have some metal in an actual thing in an actual Star Wars production and really see that come to light because some of this really works with the intensity of what's going on. In fact, I put the third video that I listed in the show notes is specifically the section about Mara Jade from the Mysteries of the Sith expansion. And oh my God, it's so hot. And it's wonderful. So check this out. It goes, it's two or three videos. It goes about an hour tops, but it's just a lot of fun. And you get a lot of really cool moments and they pull some great quotes from Asajj Ventress and everybody. I mean, they really go deep with the characters that they bring in. And I loved it. And the segment with Darth Vader is worth the price of admission alone. And guess what? It's free. So, did you happen to check? It's okay if you didn't. Did you happen to check?
Yeah, no, I did watch, two of the videos. The other thing I liked about the editing was great.
Yeah.
Kudos to the guy who put this together for just literally tracking down any and every piece of Star Wars video media with the Sith character in it.
Yeah. I mean, he covers pretty much all of them,
Yeah, he really does.
It was really cool. I loved it. And yeah, Angry Ewok Productions, I think, is the name of the YouTube channel.
I love that name.
Yeah, it's perfect. And you get it. I mean, like, this is totally made by an angry Ewok.
Yeah. This is another thing to bring up too. This is something we used to get. We didn't have, like, do you remember the game Force Commander?
Yeah. Oh, that did have a metal soundtrack.
Yes, it did. Exactly. So we used to get some of this stuff, from LucasArts and stuff. And here again, this is stuff that we lose when you hand everything over to the kings of mediocrity.
Yeah, EA. Yeah. And whoever else. Oh, that's right. The game wasn't that great, but yeah, I remember.
No, the soundtrack was. I still have the soundtrack on my cloud.
Yeah. Okay. I might ask you for that later.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't. I'm pretty sure I don't have that one. Damn. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So have fun with this, folks. It's for fun, but I think it's really cool. And if you're a Disturbed fan, I mean, you're going to love it. And I think if you're a Star Wars fan too, especially if you dig the dark side a bit. So anyway, the other thing I want to mention quickly before we get into our question of the month, this is a book we talked about when they announced it, Robin, and that is, of course, we do this in video. I don't always share the video though, but I'm just going to hold it up anyway because you never know what happens in the future. But Women of the Galaxy is the actual name of the book, but it's really Women of the Star Wars Galaxy. And I did finally get my hands on this after it came out. And I've been reading through it. It's by Amy Ratcliffe, who she works with. She's like a managing editor at Nerdist. I hate Nerdist, but she's great. And Kathleen Kennedy actually does the foreword for it, which is really nice. But it breaks down about 75 characters in it. There's just delicious art in it. I mean, absolutely stunning art. A lot of it original, I think. A lot of watercolor work done in it of like Jocasta Nu. She looks amazing. And even for Jocasta Nu. It's a really cool book. And probably the most impressive thing about it, first off, I love the fact that it's celebrating women. I will applaud anything that does that anytime. But the best part about it, and maybe the unique thing as far as with Disney goes, this is the first, it's kind of a reference book in that, and it's weird because it'll talk about the actors who play them or their creators or whatever, but then it'll talk about it in universe at the same time. So it can be kind of confusing. And some characters it talks about longer than it does others, of course. But it's kind of a reference book, and it's really the first one that I have, and I have all of them that, or pretty much all of them that Disney has put out since they bought Star Wars. This is the only one that actually covers the comic books, the novels, the movies, the TV shows, the cartoon, everything, and the video games, which of course there's only one video game that they cover, and that's Battlefront 2. But Iden Versio's in it from Battlefront 2. And it's just so nice to see all the different parts of canon get represented, because the visual guides never cover that shit. Like they not yet anyway. They haven't really. There's the Star Wars Rebels visual dictionaries, but there was only 2 of those, and they were like more of that ADD stuff. But it was, I was really pleased by this. I think it's a beautiful book, worthy of any collection, anybody that, likes this sort of thing. And I totally dug reading through it. So yeah, bravo to them for putting together a book like that. Any thoughts on that one, Robin?
Cool. No, I haven't seen it yet. It's on my wish list.
Yeah. No, it's worth it. It's a beautiful little book. So anyway, all right, let's get into our question of the month. Then we can wrap this baby up. And somehow we always end up going almost 2 hours. It doesn't matter what we plan. Okay. So the question of the month is actually kind of a sequel. It's no pun intended, but a sequel question to last month's question, which we mentioned earlier in the show was, what is our favorite prequel character? And this is actually now, what is our favorite sequel trilogy character? Now, granted, episode 9 hasn't come out yet, but I think it's fair to say that by Empire Strikes Back, most people had their favorite characters. So for only 2 movies deep, along with a lot of other extraneous material available, I think people should be able to pick this one out. But I don't know. What do you think about that, Robin? Do you think somebody should be easily able to pick out a favorite character from the sequel trilogy?
Well, I can't speak for anybody else, but I kind of agonized over this one.
I did too. Wait a minute. This should be easy.
Right. And this is kind of like, wait a minute, there's a problem here. If I can't pick out a favorite character from the new trilogy, there's something not right.
Yeah, I mean, it's and it's not like, I mean, fuck it. I think runtime, like these almost equate, like episode 7 and 8 equate to the runtime of the original trilogy is for just those two movies. Because like episode 8's the longest Star Wars movie ever. And yeah, we should be able to pick out something, but it was tough. So, well, anyway, and kind of the rule that I set was, okay, like, let's not pick, I mean, it'd be so easy to pick, General Leia, right? It'd be so easy to pick General Organa. But let's keep it to like the new characters.
Okay.
So did you end up coming up with one?
Yeah. So I'm going to go with who I would have based it on if I had just seen The Force Awakens, and that would be Finn.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because he does nothing in The Last Jedi.
yeah. I mean, he kind of does, but yeah, really, it's just he does not live up to the potential that I saw in the character in the first movie.
Right.
And I was really excited about this, this stormtrooper that goes AWOL, and he is sort of, like he's not on board with killing people.
Yeah.
And just like we were talking earlier, Star Wars needs that.
Yeah.
And they just kind of really tossed a lot of that out with episode 8 with his character. So,
yeah, that's a great point. And honestly, one that I hadn't exactly thought of, because I mean, now he's effectively just become a stormtrooper for a different group.
Right. Yeah. And that's a shame.
Yeah. Even when he gets faced with the reality by DJ that, don't you get it? Like, the war profiteers, they're playing both sides.
Right.
Like you're just a pawn, man. Right. And he just keeps going. It's like, I'll hop in that thing and do the Battle of Crate.
And I feel like the Finn of the first movie would have been, you're right. But, and like, to his credit, the movie does start out with him, and he's not really necessarily thinking about, the conflict between, the First Order and the Resistance. He wants to go save his friend Rey. Mm-hmm. And kudos to that. But they really didn't kind of build on that or push that any further.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree completely. And I thought he was a great character in the first one. I think that's a fine pick, to make. But yeah, and most people have commented on that in The Last Jedi, they really didn't do enough with his character, whether it was the right thing or wrong thing. They didn't even do enough.
Right.
Which was odd. So, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. So I really hope that, and the fact that, the J.J. Abrams directed the movie, that's the one thing I'm looking forward to with episode 9 is that his character is going to get, the attention and sort of, fulfilling some of that potential that he had in the first movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope the same. And that's really, again, as I said many times, episode 9 is really going to be the judge of 8 and 7, that's 8 and 7. However great those are is really going to rise or fall on episode 9, in my opinion. 7 might stand on its own for a bit, but yeah. So, okay. Well, I mean, that's a fine pick. Yeah, I had the hardest fucking time, like thinking of, and that annoys me to no end. Like, I mean, you could just watch episode 1 and it's like, well, I love Qui-Gon Jinn, right? Yeah. I mean, that's totally valid. And you don't need anything else. You could just say that right there. And for it to be such a tough decision, it just doesn't make any sense. And it really is a failing on Disney's part, in my opinion. So, but just on the raw humor and brashness that he brings, and I can't believe this because I'm usually not a fan of like the more hero characters, but I mean, the only Poe Dameron came to mind so quickly. I imagine all the kids love him too. But he's just some of the lines and shit he says is just so damn funny. Like, I don't know. I love it. It works. He's not a perfect character by any means. He wouldn't. And if it was a broader of like greatest Star Wars characters of all time, he wouldn't even make my top 25. But in the sequel trilogy, he stands up, and he's a lot of fun. He's just a very fun character, and I got to appreciate that because not everything in the sequel trilogy has been so fun. Yeah, so.
I think that the reason I didn't pick Poe was because in a lot of ways the character is just kind of like a funnier, more wisecracking Han Solo from the original trilogy. No, and here again, like you're trying to pick another character from the original trilogy, it feels like a cheat. So I mean, it just. Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you. And this is the thing. And I've said this before, and I might have even said it on Star Wars updates before, but I said this, a decade ago. one of the easiest things that could have saved the prequel trilogy was a Han Solo character. We didn't have that abstract character. And I think if someone like that was there to crack the jokes or to like break give us a break in the seriousness of what's going on, it could have really, really helped that. And initially I thought there was the character of Rick Olay, who was actually, most people don't know, was the first character announced for the prequel trilogy back in 98 or 97 or whatever. They actually even used the term that he was sort of a Han Solo-esque character.
I remember that distinctly. Yes. And then when he was in the movie and he had like one line and that was it, we were like, what the hell happened?
Yeah. He was nothing.
Yeah. And to bring up another point, like in a lot of ways, like what makes the Clone Wars series so great is you do get that humorous banter between Obi-Wan and Anakin, whereas it's not as present in the films.
No, what do you get it in like episode 3 where he says like, no, that business on Caden and Modia, that doesn't count.
Right.
That's like the only line you really get like that. Yeah, no, you're totally right. Not enough humor. So yeah, I think maybe that's why I'm appreciating Poe I agree with what you're saying that he is just a Han Solo, very much copycat, just kind of on steroids. So not the same kind of steroids that Han Solo was on in issue 59 of Jesus Christ. Chopping out a tree is going to chop down the whole forest.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But Poe Dameron, man. Yeah, I'll take it. So anyway. Yeah, that's what I got. I got nothing more to run with. I want to see that next Star Wars Visionaries, and it just needs to be Han Solo in the hot tub. It's going to be amazing.
We need another book like Women of the Galaxies, but it's Beefcakes of the Galaxy.
Yes. we need that right now. Make a calendar. I want my 2019 calendar. The beefcakes. Fuck, have Thrawn. Oh, like that would actually be pretty cool,
right?
And have him have like a Yusuf-Mari, like kind of just like hanging around his, or whatever right? That's how you pronounce it,
right?
The forest creatures, just have it like hanging around his neck, and he'd just be kind of like laying.
Or even Thrawn from in the new Thrawn trilogy, when they first discover him on that planet, and he's kind of disheveled and the long hair and the torn clothing, and it's a little bit more revealing, showing off his chest. And
he was jacked. He looked great. Hell, you can even. I know people would say this wouldn't work. No, I'm telling you, Tarkin. You throw Tarkin in that. I bet he was like a jacked older dude. And looking like Patrick Stewart or something, I think.
I could see him like lifting weights or something, kind of like, awesome. How Thrawn had his training room in Rebels where he was fighting against. I could see Tarkin having just a room full of like weights and exercise equipment, and he's working it.
Have Kanan like pulling out the his ponytail and just kind of like waving his hair like Fabio. It'd be perfect. Oh, I could totally see this. All right, Beefcakes of the Galaxy. We're going to make this happen. I'm going to get in touch with somebody. This has got to be a thing. So anyway, so I think that'll do it for the Star Wars update for December 2018. Happy Saturnalia, everybody, as that is the occasion. It's Saturnalia right now.
Or Sithmas if you prefer.
Oh, Sithmas. Oh, I like that. Yeah, I think I've heard that before, but I like that. I'm trying. Calendar. I keep forgetting when Saturnalia and actually Calendar starts. But regardless, anyway, everybody enjoy yourselves. We certainly have been recording this. Robin, as always, it's one of my favorite times of the month. I just love it, man. And so I thank you for joining me once again.
And I thank you for having me.
Yeah, 2019 is going to be a hell of a time, and we have some long laid plans for the Star Wars update that I'm thinking we're going to be able to get to here soon.
Wow, that's right. I guess we'll see you guys next year.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. So, 2018 is out, and so are we. Anyway, thanks again, Robin, and we will see all of you on the other side. Woo!